All right, guys, welcome today to our episode about does marriage counseling work? So, when someone's looking for marriage counseling, usually there's a few problems that they're coming in with. One of the big ones is infidelity, dealing with the consequences of that, whether that's sexual infidelity or emotional infidelity. Another one is being close to divorce, right? You're almost at that point, but you're like, hey, let's give it one more chance here. Sometimes guys will hear from their wives, I love you, but I'm not in love with you. Very hard thing to hear, hard to deal with. Sexual problems, too much sex, not enough sex, just not a good connection there. Having the same disagreements over and over, feeling like you can't get past it, whether that's about money, parenting, sex, in-laws, or other things. Poor communication, feeling like, we just can't seem to understand each other. We can't seem to communicate well. Feeling unsupported, unappreciated, or overwhelmed in your marriage. Feeling like nothing you do is ever good enough. I know I felt like this for a long time in my own marriage. Not feeling heard or understood. And just an overall lack of connection. So those are all problems that people come into marriage counseling for, or looking for marriage counseling advice or help with. So they come in with those problems, or you're maybe having those problems and looking at marriage counseling, but what do you really want on the other side of it? So you want more connection, right? You want to be able to overcome conflict and come out the other side even more connected because of it. And that can happen. That's one of the big things I teach people is how to do that. You want more intimacy. So, and I define intimacy, sexual is part of that, but it's also just knowing your spouse and being known by them, really deeply knowing each other and respecting each other. Having a best friend, someone you can share those things with. Having a strong, passionate, and unbreakable bond with our wife. As men, that's what we want. Appreciation, acceptance, and love. Having a teammate to get through life with, right? So those are all the things that we want when we go into marriage counseling or when we're looking at marriage counseling, considering options. So marriage counseling has some classic ways that they go about this. And we're going to figure out, whether those are effective or not, whether marriage counseling is typically effective or not. So one of the big ones they work on is improving communication skills. Okay? You might have heard this I emotion language. So saying stuff like, when you didn't take the trash out, I felt mad. Or when you turned me down for sex, I felt sad. Something like that. So, and then the idea being when you share that your spouse then kind of validates that back to you, says, hey, I hear you felt sad when that happened. Okay, sounds like it should work. Another big one is just kind of doing what your spouse wants. So some classic books that kind of go about this approach are like the 5 love languages, his needs, her needs. A lot of ones kind of subscribe to this type of theory, which is, hey, if you just do more of what your spouse wants, so 5 love languages, if you just figure out your wife likes more gifts, you just give her more gifts, your marriage is going to be great. Or you figure out you like your wife to tell you how great you are. If she would just do that more, then your marriage would be great, right? So I used to believe this for a long time. And so I would tell my wife, like, hey, I like words of affirmation, so just tell me more how great I am or how much you appreciate me. And she would do that for a while and then not. And when she did, I'd feel okay, kind of. But I'd sort of bullied her into that in a way. And so it helped a little bit, but it didn't address the root, which was that, I didn't have a strong enough sense of my own self-worth. Okay, and we're going to get into that. But, I was relying on her to give me my sense of value. And that wears her out and it gets, it's not good for me either. It's not good for marriage. So, but it sounds good, right? It sounds like, hey, if my wife would just have sex with me more, my marriage would be perfect, right? It just doesn't actually work that way, typically. Another one is just supporting your spouse, right? So, whatever they say or whatever they want to do, you just say, okay, like I support you. I'm gonna help you with that. Validate their feelings and experiences. So, a while back, my wife told me she had some questions about our church, and that was super hard on me. I took that very, very personally. But the support thing would have said, hey, just tell her that's okay and it's fine to have questions and that's great, whether I really felt that way or not. So, it sounds like it should help. It sounds like it should work. And what usually happens is it does work for a little while, right? So for a little bit, like my wife is telling me how great I am and I feel kind of good. Or I'm, doing acts of service more for her and it's kind of working good. But it kind of works until it doesn't. And here's why, right? So first of all, you came in wondering, does marriage counseling work? The fact is, up to 85% of couples are the same or even worse off after marriage counseling. So why is that, right? So in my experience, there's a few reasons for that. One is that it's sort of like a contract arrangement, right? So, you go into marriage counseling, you say, okay, I'm using this I emotion language. I told you these are my love languages. And those are yours. So I'm going to try to, give you more appreciation, right? Or I'm going to give you more words of affirmation. So you start doing that. But then when your wife does not have sex with you as much as you sort of agreed to, now you feel like, okay, fine, well, I don't need to appreciate you anymore, right? So that contract is kind of broken. So when your wife breaks her end, you feel like, okay, I don't need to keep my end anymore. And that's a lot of times what happens is it just falls apart, right? The other thing is it waits for your spouse to kind of support you, right? So you're not going to come and tell your wife, that these things are bothering you or that you're worried about these different things until you feel like she's going to be okay with it or she's going to just say that's fine or whatever. Again, you're kind of, waiting for her to make you feel like you're okay. Also, a lot of times it depends on both people wanting to do therapy. There's not a lot of marriage counselors that will say, okay, yeah, sir, if you just want to work on your marriage, that's fine, I'll help you. A lot of them will say, no, your wife needs to be involved with this too. And so you're kind of stuck, right? If you want to work on it and your wife doesn't, what do you do? It can also take a really long time. It can take years, and sometimes that's too long. Another thing, it doesn't take time to sort of build up a positive base. And to me, that positive base is, personal development, building up strength in these areas, which we're going to be talking about. And as a guy, it doesn't help you build your core attractiveness, which is strength. Okay. Women, they've always been attracted to strength. If you go back to caveman days, right, they were looking for men to, hunt, fight bad guys off, right? Defeat beasts, all that kind of thing. Nowadays, that's not as important. It's more about mental, emotional, spiritual, and sexual strength. Mental strength being you're in control of your thoughts, right? Emotional meaning you're not going to lose your temper and you're going to be intentional about what you're feeling, right? And even know what you're feeling. A lot of guys can't even figure that out. Another one is spiritual strength. That can be religious, but it's more about being a man of integrity, a man of your word. And then sexual strength, approaching sex not so much in a way to just be about you and about orgasm, but about connection. Okay, so when you build those things, now you're attracting your wife back to you. And that's what I help guys figure out how to do. So building a strong marriage really depends on building strength in those areas. So just a quick bit about me. My name is Mike Frazier, MD. I went to BYU, got my major in neuroscience there. So I got to learn about the brain and how it works. I went to UCLA Medical School and then I became a psychiatrist, went to psychiatry residency after that. Married with 5 children to the lovely, lovely woman there. And I do marriage coaching for professional men. So if you're a guy, professional guy, you want to work on your marriage, I'd love to work with you. If your wife wants to do it too, great. But if she doesn't, I'm happy to help to work just with you. I've been cited in Men's Journal, Red Book, Ask Men, and the U.S. News and World Report. And guys, I love this work. I love helping men with their marriages. I just love teaching because it's what's helped me so much in my marriage, is building these strengths up that I'm going to be talking to you about in just a minute here. So I want to talk about why neediness doesn't work, why this idea of needing your wife so much causes problems. So it's really, to me, the core problem is depending too much on our wife for these things. So depending on her 4, your feeling of self-worth. Okay, that's probably one of the biggest ones. To manage our anxiety. And then needing them for intimacy, which to me I'm going to define as validating our deeper thoughts, dreams, feelings, and desires. Okay, so needing them to validate that for us. So again, I think one of the biggest ones is trying to get your sense of self-worth from your spouse. So you rely on your spouse for your sense of self. So what happens? What are the symptoms of this? So one of them would be getting upset if she criticizes you, right? So not just like, oh, that's annoying, but like, oh, wow, that really hurts. Or you approach her for sex and she turns you down, right? And now you're walking away, you're whiny, you're upset, you're feeling like a failure, okay? Or getting upset when you don't get enough appreciation, or if she doesn't agree with you, or you're just asking for validation all the time for sex or in other areas. So one of the things, I still do this, but like after I work out, I'll go and like flex in front of my wife. It's kind of funny, but and I'm wanting that validation from her. So before, right, if she didn't give me validation, I'd feel like a failure. Oh, I'm not strong enough. I gotta go work out harder. Now it's kind of like more of a funny thing that we do together. But definitely, I would, if she turned me down for sex, felt awful, get upset, get angry. I was always asking, oh, you don't appreciate me enough. Right? So an example of that, I gave a few there, but flowers, right? I would bring my wife flowers. And if she didn't like hug me and kiss me and tell me how great I was, I'd feel like a failure, right? And I was really just trying to pull that sense of self-worth out of her. In another episode here, we're going to be talking about the mosquito and the dictator and how we try to pull worth out of our wife. I was being a mosquito there, right? I was trying to pull appreciation out of her. And eventually she gets sick of that, right? So what's the solution? The solution here is valuing yourself regardless of your wife's opinion or behaviors, right? So with the flowers example, the solution would be just going in and saying, hey, like, here's flowers. I did this because I care about you. I was thinking about you. And then that's it. Feeling good about myself because I chose to do that, right? I chose to act in a loving way. For me, a big part of that too is knowing that I'm a son of God and getting my sense of worth from there, right? Instead of trying to pull it out of my wife or people I work with or whatever. Another place that we can all get that sense of worth is being a man of our word, a man of integrity, right? When we keep our word, that builds up our self-confidence. We know we can trust ourselves, and then other people can trust us too. So if infidelity was part of this, guys, building up that trust really depends on you becoming more trustworthy, right? You want your wife to trust you again. You have to make and keep promises. Okay? And that's how she's going to trust you again. The trust is the fruit of being trustworthy. So you have to be trustworthy. All right. And I consider this spiritual strength is having that deep sense of self-worth, right? Another one can be anxiety, right? You might have trouble managing your own anxiety. So that might come out like this, like needing to talk about problems to your wife regardless of her response, or wanting to control her behaviors. So in my own marriage, when something would bother me, a lot of times it was about sex. So, I would want more sex and I would want to talk to her about it and she wouldn't want to talk about it. But I would literally like follow her around the house. She was trying to get away and I would just like chase her, say, let's talk about this. Let's talk about this. In a lot of marriages, the woman will be the one kind of chasing the guy and the guy's trying to pull away. And, it's the same problem though, where you feel attacked, you feel criticized, so you pull away. That's a problem with not having that sense of self-worth and also not managing your own anxiety because you're feeling overwhelmed by her kind of trying to talk to you, right? So that's ways that can come out. So the solution is learning to manage your own anxiety and calm yourself down, okay? So if my wife's not wanting to talk about it, I need to just remind myself, hey, like, chasing around is not going to be helpful, and I can manage this anxiety on my own. I can do some breathing, I can walk around, I can still ask that we talk about this, but do it at a time when we both can, do it in a rational way, right? And I consider that mental and emotional strength. So choosing my thoughts and, managing my own anxiety. So need for intimacy. So the problem is needing your spouse for intimacy. So what happens here is you're not going to be willing to share your thoughts, your feelings, or your ideas unless your wife agrees in advance to be extremely understanding and supportive. Okay. So this happens a lot. There's a guy named David Schnarch. He wrote a book called Passionate Marriage that a lot of these ideas come from. It's a great book. But he talks about how do you know the married couple in a restaurant? It's the couple that's not talking to each other. And some people will say that's why, it's a joke, but some people say it's because they don't have anything to say to each other anymore. But his argument is they don't have anything to say to each other that won't upset the other person. Okay? So, if I'm sitting there with my wife, if her opinion has become so important that I can't share something with her that might upset her, okay, that's a problem. Now we're stuck, right? Now we're trapped in our marriage. And again, that comes back to me not being able to value myself enough to share something with her, even though it might upset her or might not be that, she might not like it that much. Okay. So let me give some examples of that. So an example might be not sharing sexual desires because you're afraid of being shut down. So for a long time, I was afraid to tell my wife, like, hey, sex is important to me, or hey, like, I'd like to try this sexually, because I was afraid of, looking stupid or being shut down. Religious differences. So my wife was actually a good example of this one, where she had these questions about our church. She knew that was going to upset me, no question. She knew it. But she had to be true to herself, right? She had to say, look, this is so important to me that I'm still going to share it with you, even though I know it's going to upset you. And what happened, right? For a while, there was friction, right? There was friction in our marriage because I didn't want to hear that. It was hard for me to hear it. But it forced me to grow up and develop my own sense of spirituality more. And on the other side of it, now I feel like a more spiritual person. I feel like I've developed my own sense of who I am better because she was willing to do that. So she was brave, and that forced me to kind of grow up. Okay, and that's what happens. That's what can happen in your marriage, right? You start sharing these things that are important by using something called self-validated intimacy. So she had to say to herself, like, look, this is important enough to me. I'm going to share it, even though it might make him mad. And I had to say, look, I have to tell my wife how important sex is to me, even though I know it's hard on her. And that helped her grow and me grow. Okay, so it's bringing that, true self to the marriage. So what happens, you don't share stuff with your spouse, and your spouse doesn't share stuff with you, and you're stuck, right? That's when you're at the table together and not saying anything to each other. So the solution, sharing yourself without expecting or needing validation from her. Just saying, look, this is me. This is what is important to me. And you might not like it, and that's okay because I'm okay with it, right? And again, it all kind of comes back to that sense of self-worth. If you feel that worth in yourself from God, or from knowing you're a evolved person, or wherever that sense of worth comes from, definitely it can come from making and keeping promises, right? If you have that sense of self, it's easier for you to then share those things and have that self-validated intimacy, saying, look, this is a line in the sand for me. This is where I'm at spiritually. This is where I'm at sexually, and being willing to share that. And this really, you need all the strengths to do that. You need emotional strength so you don't get overwhelmed when you're sharing stuff. You need spiritual strength to know, where you're at and being true to who you are. You need mental strength, right? And sexual strength to know, what's important, approach it from more of that connection standpoint. So a way to think about this is, instead of going back to that picture, I put a teepee up earlier because in a teepee, right, the sticks kind of lean on each other. Or just imagine a teepee if you're listening to this. So a teepee, if your marriage is like a teepee, you're kind of like leaning on each other. And if one of you isn't there, that teepee is going to all fall over. So another way to think about marriage is in a few different ways. So one is like water. So a water molecule, it's made up of hydrogen and oxygen. Okay. So let's say you, as the husband, you're the hydrogen, your wife's the oxygen, right? So when you are your own person and you're strong as that own person, and your wife is strong as her own person, apart, you're both able to function, you're able to do great things. But then when you come together, it makes something even better. It's even at like a higher order, right? Now you created water, which has its own properties and all that. So when you bring your whole self to the marriage and your wife brings her whole self, now you've created something amazing, something even better than was there before. It's like a higher level. Okay, so you don't have to disappear, right? You didn't just turn into something different. You're still there. You're still hydrogen, right? Your wife's still oxygen. You're still both yourselves, but you've come together. You've created a bond that's created something amazing. Right? Another way to think about it is like a bicycle, right? So you got two wheels. You need both those wheels to be functioning well. And now you can get places a lot faster than like if you were a unicycle, right? Or just a tire by itself, right? So that marriage connects those two tires. And now, wow, you can go faster, you can turn faster, you can, do all these great things because you've made that connection together. But you both need to be strong, right? If one wheel is all floppy and weak, right? If you got a flat tire, you're going to be like worse off than on one wheel. Another way to think of it is like a band, right? So if you're a strong guitar player and your wife's a great singer, you can make a great band, right? Even better than you playing the guitar on her own or her singing on her own, right? When you're strong together, you make something even better than what you could have been alone, right? And that's the point, developing that strength. Another way to think about like a football team or whatever sport you play or like to play, okay? So there's different players on that team. That front line, they're big, they're strong. That quarterback, he's got a good arm. The wide receivers, they can catch well. The defense, right? They are quick, they're strong, they can tackle people. Right? So everybody has their different strengths, and together now you can do something even better than you could do on your own, right? If you've got, the 11 guys that are all built like the front line, you're going to be pretty slow. You're not going to be able to throw the ball very well, probably. If you're all built like a quarterback, well, you're going to get tackled by the other team, right? So, all of us, we have our role to play. Another way to think about it is like a bridge, right? So you've got these two big posts that are both very strong, and then the bridge connects you, right? So you got to have those strong posts, and the marriage is like the connection between them. But if the bridge fell, right, these posts would still be there on their own, okay? Or going back, like if your team fell apart, you'd still be a good quarterback or a good front lineman. Or if the team fell apart, you'd still be a good guitarist, right? Going back to the other examples there. So I call this the super marriage system, which is building up these different strengths so that you can have an incredible connection between you. It depends on self-validated intimacy, knowing who you are and being willing to share that with your spouse, even if they're not so okay with it. Because when you do that, it can grow your marriage to new levels. Managing your own anxiety instead of relying on your spouse to manage it for you. Having that solid sense of self-worth that we talked about. Okay, developing that mental, emotional, spiritual, and sexual strength. When you're strong like that, you guys can come together and you can create amazing things. So it's two strong people that creates a great marriage. Okay, two dependent people, it doesn't really. It creates a marriage that is very subject to falling down. It's that teepee, right? Where if one of you starts getting weak, now the whole thing crashes, right? Versus like a band, right? Where if the singer checks out, you're still playing the guitar and you're still doing okay, right? So it's those two strong people that take things to the next level. And as the cool thing is, right? If you start developing this strength, your wife's going to start seeing it. She's going to be attracted to you. And it's going to push her to start developing herself as well. Right? So that's the beautiful thing. So going back to what we want connection. Okay, as we develop these strengths, we learn better who we are, and we can share better who we are, and that creates connection. We want to overcome conflict. There's certain skills that we can learn to do that. Part of it's understanding, part of it is sharing. Right? That's kind of the two parts. One is getting into our wife's shoes. The other part is explaining ourselves in a clear way. And then being willing to get to a better solution together. Okay? That's how we do it. But it requires quite a bit of strength. It requires emotional strength to understand your wife. It requires spiritual and emotional and mental strength to state what you want clearly. You want her to be your best friend. The way that you be best friends is you share who you are with each other, even when it's, kind of ugly or not great. Okay, that's how you become best friends. You want that strong, passionate, unbreakable bond with your wife. You totally can do it. As you develop that strength, she's going to be attracted to you. It's like that hydrogen and oxygen, right? They grow together because they're built certain ways and they're strong in certain ways, and then they come together. Okay, when you have strength, it draws your wife to you. You want appreciation, acceptance, and love. Okay, when you appreciate yourself and who you are, when you love yourself, so love yourself it's a kind of a tricky one, but the way I look at it is seeing myself as God sees me, right? So when I can see that and I have that real love for me, okay, it's easy to share love and also for others to love me as well. You want a teammate, so you create that by being a great teammate yourself, okay? And then your wife can come along too and add her strengths, and now you've created a great team. Now, the funny thing is, right, you want all these things. You came in thinking, right, your wife was going to give you all these things. But when you have strength in yourself and you don't really need it, okay, you don't need your wife to fill your sense of self-worth, you don't need her to manage your anxiety, that's when you're most likely to get her appreciation and admiration and affection, is when you're not trying to suck it out of her, right? When she can give it to you freely and you're the kind of guy that's strong and attractive, okay? That's when you're going to get it. So I hope this was, helpful for you today. These are principles that are so helpful to me. Again, why marriage counseling doesn't work that well typically is because it really depends on the other person validating you. It depends on the other person being there. It depends on this contract agreement, right? Where if your spouse doesn't do her part, now you feel like you don't have to do your part, okay? Solution is building up who you are as a person, building up these strengths. So you feel good about yourself and you attract your wife to you, and then you build each other up over time. So what to do next? So I'd love for you to come visit MikeFrazierMD.com and register for our next webinar. Okay? The webinar is called The 4 Strengths You Need to Become Irresistible to Your Wife, Even After Infidelity. And those strengths are these ones we've talked about today: mental, emotional, spiritual, and sexual strength. Okay, we're going to go into more detail about how to develop those in the webinar. When you sign up for the webinar, you'll also get the 7-day strategy men use to save their marriage email course. So you're going to get 7 days of specific tips, specific phrases, specific things you can do to win your wife back. It's geared especially towards men who have been unfaithful to their wives. So it talks about building trust back, things you can do to do that and to overcome that difficult situation. Right? So go over, visit MikeFrazierMD.com now, sign up, and I'll see you guys on the next webinar.